Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dirt with D. I guess it's been a while. I gotta adjust a few things here real quick. Bear with me for a second. So first of all, I'd like to apologize. I was actually down with the flu bug, and then I had an ear infection. And actually, quite honestly, it even hurt to put my damn headphones on. So for the past couple of weeks, I really wasn't able to do much of a podcast. So for those of you, few that actually do watch the podcast, I apologize for not getting with it. So first of all, let me go over a few things about the Bottle House here. So this weekend, we've got a hell of a weekend coming up. We have, in my opinion, one of the best country bands around. If you want a two-step, anywhere from old country to brand spanking new country, these guys are the guys. Friday night, we have Blackwater Jack, and trust me, if you have not seen these guys, you got to see them. They're phenomenal. They're great musicians. They're tight. Sammy can sing his ass off. They're just great guys. And then Saturday night, we have the return. Yeah, that's right. The return of Todd Plesko with Sinner. Sinner hits the stage Saturday night with Todd Plesko back behind the guitar. Looking forward to that. Todd's a great guy. If you missed it, he was on the podcast here a couple months ago. And we just had a great time. Like I said, Todd's just, he's good people. All the guys in the band, they're great guys. Come on out Saturday. It's going to be crowded. Come out. We're going to have a good time. So tonight, I've been working on something here for the last few weeks. I planned on doing this Memorial Day, kind of a special Memorial Day podcast, but unfortunately, being sick, I really wasn't able to do it. It's not all about music on here, and it's not all about bars and so on and so forth and bands. I started this for other reasons. Now it's 90% music and bands, but occasionally I might have to go off onto a personal tangent, I guess we can call it. So tonight, I actually want to take some time and honor one of my personal heroes. The guy is amazing. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but I want to talk about my father for a little bit. My father, Carroll Edward Flora. Nobody called him Carroll. Trust me. Everybody was scared to death of him growing up, so nobody called the old man Carroll. It was always Ed Flora. Ed Flora was born in a little town in Maryland, Brunswick. It was kind of on the convergence of Maryland, West Virginia, and Virginia. It's right there, right on the river, right at the convergence. There's a few things I said about Brunswick, and I won't repeat on air, but it was a unique little town. So yeah, Dad was born there in 1941. He was born. The actual date is kind of it's a mystery. It was either August 20th, 21st, or 23rd. Nobody is quite sure because different records show different things. As Dad used to always say, he was late on one day and hatched 3 days later. So depends on which records we go by, military records or what. But anyway, so kind of like me, he was a fluke. So my father actually joined the military in 1959. He was did 3 years in the military. Now, I've got some notes here, and I'm going to have to read them tonight because there's so much here that I don't want to screw up. And actually, there's a lot of information I don't have, and there's a reason for that, and I'll talk about that later. So Dad he joined the military in 1959. Really didn't have much else going on. In the 50s, you're in a small town. What do you do? Well, he went in the military. So he joined in 59. He trained to become an infantry scout, which he did. He served his 3 years, and he was honorably discharged in 1962. So he came back home. He actually went to work for my uncle on my uncle's farm, and it didn't take him long to figure out he wasn't cut out to be a farmer. Well, and obviously at that time, there was a lot of unrest going on over in a little area of the world that nobody even knew about called Vietnam. Those of you, the younger generation, I know you guys don't know much about Vietnam. You don't know what it was about, why it started, so on and so forth. But anyway, so North Vietnam and South Vietnam. South Vietnam was called a democratic country. And North Vietnam was very heavily communist. Ho Chi Minh was a staunch communist, and he wanted to actually invade South Vietnam because he wanted to expand communism into South Vietnam. And the history of Vietnam, it goes back. Vietnam had been at war for many years with the French, the Chinese, so on and so forth. They were just for 30 years before we got there, they were at war, and they were a very very well trained, very organized army, the North Vietnamese army. Not just a bunch of little guys out there running around with with hand-me-down weapons. They were very organized. So my father decided he's going to re-up. So in 1964, he decided to re-up, which he did. He was actually sent over to Germany. He served in Germany, spent a couple years there. Actually, I know this is kind of weird, but I was a few months away from becoming a German citizen. But actually, they came back before I was born. But yes, it's weird, but I was, well, not to go into the gory details, but I guess I was conceived in Germany. My my mother's side's all German, so hey, yeah, I would have fit in. So Dad got back, and he decided, okay, he's going to go to jump school, which he did. He went to jump school. Along comes this little snot-nosed little punk kid in September of 1966. I was born. My father was not there. He was in Fort Benning going through jump school. Dad came home when I was a couple weeks old, spent 1 week there, shipped out to Vietnam. He got his orders to go to Vietnam. When he got there, Dad was in the 199th Infantry Division. He was a platoon sergeant. So he spent the first couple months there in combat. Actually, that's where he received his first Bronze Star. I won't go into all that stuff until a little bit later, but he was awarded the Bronze Star. And then he transferred because he went to jump school and he had the training that most other guys didn't. He actually transferred to the 5th Special Forces Group. There's a lot more involved in it than that, but I just, the details, it's kind of hard to go into all the details right now. So he gets into the 5th Special Forces. And then he kept hearing about this unit or this thing nobody knew about called SOG. Nobody had any idea what SOG was. You'd hear people talking about it. All they said was, no matter what you do not volunteer for SOG. Yeah, of course, nobody knew what the hell it was. It said, if you join SOG, you will die. It was pretty much that straightforward. You will die. Well, I can't say the floors are the smartest people in the world. Dad actually met with... he was actually confronted by an officer. Had no idea. This officer called him in and said, Flora, I understand you like killing Vietnamese. Now, when he was in the 199th, his platoon, it was called Flora's Fighting Fools. They were some tough little buggers. So he was called into this office, and he said, so I understand you like killing Vietnamese. And he said, well, sir, that's what I'm paid for. He said, I want to offer you an opportunity that it'll be one of the most interesting jobs you'll ever hold in your life. And of course, Dad's saying, well, what is it? And, the officer, well, I can't tell you what it is until you agree to it, which is kind of weird. Yeah, they don't tell you what it is until you're actually into it. He said, this is a 6-month commitment, 6 missions, 6-month commitment. And, Dad being the fool that he was, like I said, my father always told me we volunteer for way too much crap, which, I hate to say it. He's right. He said, yes, sir, I'd like to join this unit. And he said, well, Sergeant Floor, welcome to SOG. Welcome to MACV SOG. And at the time, Dad had no clue whatsoever what MACV SOG was. Nobody did. They were basically ghosts. Nobody knew anything about them. In fact, so here's the old man. This is how I knew my father for quite a few years. He was a picture. I didn't know much more about him. He was just a picture. So Dad was introduced to SOG. So he was flown up to, he was operating out of FOB-1 out of Phu Bai. Phu Bai is on the north quadrant of Vietnam. It's up fairly close to the DMZ. It's kind of a coastal little area. He figured, this can't be too bad. So he gets there, and then he starts to find out what SOG is. SOG is a clandestine unit. It's actually Military Assistance Command Vietnam. They went by a couple different names after that. At that time, it was a Special Operations Group. They actually changed it later to Survey and Observations Group because somebody in the military found out what SOG standed for, so they changed it. So he got there and thought it was strange that he gets on this base and all these guys are walking around fully armed. They're decked out, grenades, rifles. Typically on a military base, you weren't allowed to carry your weaponry. It had to be stored until you were actually sent on a mission. So Dad was assigned to this recon team, which nobody even knew what the hell a recon team was. Well, he didn't know what a recon team was. He was assigned to a RT Dakota. So RT Dakota was, it was at the time a 9-man team. There were 3 Americans, 1-1, which was Henshaw. Actually, excuse me, a 1-0, which is Henshaw, 1-1, my father, and there was a 1-2, but the 1-2 changed quite often. Usually the 1-2 was kind of like a radio man. So the way it worked, a 1-0 was team leader, 1-1 was assistant leader, and the 1-2 typically was a radio man. And then the rest of the team was made up by indigenous personnel. Now, indigenous personnel, that doesn't mean necessarily South Vietnamese. In fact, Dad's team was made up by Montagnards. So Montagnards were basically Vietnamese mountain men, but they were kind of the scourge of the Vietnamese society. They hated the Vietnamese. They hated them. They were treated horribly politically. They were treated like dirt. But like Dad said, well, they called them little people because the typical Vietnamese soldier was about 5'6". They weren't that big. They were tiny guys. So Dad gets in this team. So this is I think it was April of 1967. Okay, so he's a member of SOG. So he does his 6-month commitment, six missions. He figures, this shouldn't be any big deal. He still didn't know what SOG actually did. Well, what SOG did was, again, they were extremely clandestine, and they went over the fence. What does over the fence mean? Well, that means all their missions were carried out in either Cambodia, Laos, or occasionally Thailand, sometimes North Vietnam. See, early on in the war, there was an agreement that neither the United States nor North Vietnam would cross the Laotian or Cambodian border. Okay, all the fighting was supposed to be done in Vietnam. Well, let's just say the Vietnamese didn't adhere to that very well. In fact, any of you know anything about Vietnam, you've heard of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was basically a supply line from North Vietnam all the way down to the Mekong Delta. And it wasn't just a trail; it was literally a highway. I mean, they had truck stops. They actually had gas pipelines. That's how they traversed all their troops down to South Vietnam. They didn't come across DMZ. They were actually moving through Laos and Cambodia, and that's how they actually made their way into Vietnam. So this SOG was actually formed in 1965. It was actually a joint operation, CIA and the United States military. They realized they had to do something about the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We knew that the Vietnamese were using it, but again, we weren't allowed to be in Laos or Cambodia. So they came with this bright idea. Okay, they're going to have a clandestine unit they're going to form that they're going to actually send in parties to observe the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That's where the Studies and Observations group comes in. They were observers. They weren't freaking observers, trust me. So one thing that they had to do when you actually joined SOG, you had to sign the Non-Disclosure Act. So for 20 years, they couldn't talk about it. And, I always wondered when my father got back why he never talked about what he did. And I'll go into more what happened to him later, but Dad never talked about it. Well, come to find out later, there was a non-disclosure. Nobody in SOG could actually discuss what they did. They were just ghosts. Nobody knew anything about them. So then he finds out, okay, we're crossing the fence. That means they're going across border. When they did it, they went in completely sterile. That means they didn't carry any American insignias, no dog tags, no nothing. They were basically, if they were captured, they could easily be shot as a spy. So they did this, and this is kind of the condensed version. So he serves, I think it was, he did his 4th mission. Well, they were called on what's called a bright light. A bright light means one of two things. Either there's a downed pilot, or there's another team out there just getting their asses handed to them. So they called in a bright light. Dad's team, RT Dakota, was sent in. I'm not sure the other team that was on the ground, but basically they were getting their asses handed to them. Because these guys, so what SOG did, now here's where I go to my notes because I got to read some of this stuff. Let me find this. SOG's objectives were recon. I wrote a bunch of stuff. PSYOPs, assassinations to a point, seek and destroy and harassment, personal rescues, which was pilots and so on and so forth, because unfortunately we did have pilots and chopper crews that were shot down in Laos and Cambodia. Wiretaps, they were just the dark guys, but their main job was recon. They were actually reconning the Ho Chi Minh Trail. but they were also sent out to observe and find troop displacements or troop deployments. They could be sent out to find battalion strength. That's, a 6-man, 9-man team. They're going out, and many times they did scrap with significantly larger forces than their own, but they were trained very well. One thing that Dad did like about SOG is there were no rules. They carried what they wanted. Any weapon that they wanted was available to them. There was no, we can't get that for you. You tell us what you want, you get it. They typically didn't carry M16s for a couple of reasons. At the time, the M16 was not very reliable. And also, the last thing you want to do is be in country and pop off an M16 round, because the M16 had a very, very distinct sound. So typically, they'd carry a CAR-15, sometimes AKs. Dad, particularly, he liked to carry a sawed-off. He said that was my last line of defense. I think he carried a 45. And they also, what else did he carry? It depended. Obviously, they had their SOG knives, which they use quite a bit. Here, I saw, again, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read a bunch of stuff. So anyway, so they carried, an RP-75s, which were little grenade launchers, basically. There was a handheld grenade launcher. Claymores, frag grenades, so on and so forth. They went in heavily armored. A typical mission was, on average, 5 days. Sometimes it could be a couple, 2-3 hours if they were dropped into a hot zone. They had to pull them back out real quick. And sometimes it can go on to 7, 8, 10 days. It just depends on the situation, because they weren't able always to be extracted. So he's on these, he goes out, he does his missions. They came under fire a few times, but they got out. Nothing really major. There were a few injuries and so on and so forth. Oh, so in SOG, the mortality, so the kill ratio for SOG was 158 to 1. That means for every SOG member killed, there were 158 NVA, VC that were killed. And the mortality rate was over 120%, which means that every SOG member was injured at least once. Yeah, there was, again, 120. I don't know what the actual KIA rate was for SOG, but it was quite high as well, too. Again, he was told, if you join SOG, you will die. So SOG consisted of, at one point, there were about 4,000 people through the course of Vietnam when SOG was enacted until it was disbanded in 72. There were roughly 4,000. Those 4,000, only 600 were boots on the ground. And SOG there were RT teams, and there were, they had a larger team they sent into. Those were typically about 40 guys, but the RT teams were typically, I said, anywhere from about 6 to 9 people, depending on the actual 1-0 decided what he wanted. He decided his personnel. There were no, rank didn't matter. You could be a 1-0 on a team. You could be a staff sergeant and have a lieutenant on your team. Your lieutenant could be your 1-1. It was all about experience in the field. So they're doing their missions. Everything goes well. Yeah, they did face a lot of heat. So I think it was I want to say it was either his 4th or 5th mission. They were called in a bright light mission. Again, some other team was getting their ass handed to them. This was, I believe it was July 19th of 1967. So they fly in, they're dropped in, they find these guys, they're fighting their ass off. They're fighting VC as well as NVA. And, they get these guys, they actually, get everybody rounded out, get the team in, and they run an RON, a rest overnight position. All right. Well, the Vietnamese usually didn't. They would come at you at nighttime, but typically the first thing in the morning is when they like to actually come at you. Oh, and I should say, so when Dad was in SOG, it was early on in SOG. SOG became a lot more prevalent in 68, 69. They had more members, so this was very, very early. In fact, RT Dakota was only the 3rd team to go over the fence. Now, that was before Dad actually joined it, but they were only the 3rd SOG team that actually was deployed to Laos or Cambodia. And the way it worked was that there were different bases. There was CCN, CCC, and CCS. CN. It was a North Division, a Central Division, and a South Division. The South Division typically was, Cambodia and so on and so forth. But where Dad flew out of, all their missions were in Laos. So, again, here they wake up. It's July 20th. Okay. So they got these guys. They're at a firefight. The weather was actually bad, so they couldn't call on an evac. They actually had a Covey riders that flew over top of them. They were actually other SOG members that were forward air control. They would actually go up with Air Force pilots, and they would actually observe from the air, and they were a big help to the guys on the ground. Now, one good thing about SOG too is they had every asset available to them. If they would call in a prairie fire mission, it was typically they had gunships coming, I didn't say gunships, gunships coming in, so on and so forth. Shining Brass, prairie fire. There were a bunch of different names of these missions they were on. So what he was on again was a bright light mission. So their job was to get this other team out. Okay, so they find these team. They have injuries. The next that whole day, they're getting their asses handed to them. Another, I think one or two of Dad's yards were injured, and actually Henshaw, the 1-1, was injured. So Dad is now, he's basically running the show. He's the 1-0 after Henshaw got injured. So they fought their ass off all day long. They got to a secure position, and they had another RON, rest overnight. At this time, they're actually calling an air support, doing everything they can. They called an evac in for the next day because they couldn't get out. It was too late in the day. And choppers can't fly at nighttime over there. I mean, they could, but they can't find you. And in Laos, where they were at, the canopy was so thick that they'd never find them. So the next morning, they've got an evac coming in. And then all hell broke loose. There was an NVA. Dad doesn't know exactly what size force was coming at them, but he said it was just a hailstorm. They were getting just their asses shot off. Had a couple more injuries. And then Dad was actually shot. He actually, a bullet went through his wrist and came out near his elbow. Most of his arm was gone. He was able to get all the other team members to the chopper. They actually dropped a penetrator from a CH-53, and a penetrator was actually made to drop through the canopy to where they can get out. So he got the rest of the team out. He was one of the last ones being airlifted out. Well, in the meantime, they actually had an NVA prisoner, because prisoners, that was one of their jobs, to extract prisoners, because they got a lot of valuable information off the NVA prisoners as far as troop movement, troop size, where they were at, what they were doing, so on and so forth. So they were being evac'd out. Dad got to the penetrator. He got the other guy on there. Everybody strapped in. They're being evac'd out. And they were about 100 foot above the canopy, about 200 foot above the ground. And the cable was either shot or snapped. Nobody knows for sure. He thinks the cable was shot. Of course, he said those little bastards couldn't shoot straight anyway, so they're probably shooting at me and hit the cable. To which point, Dad dropped about 200 feet. He dropped through the canopy and on the ground. Obviously, he was already shot in the arm, so he was very weak. Beat the shit out of him, hit the ground, and was completely knocked unconscious. All right. So, the choppers, he actually wakes up 15, 20 minutes later, and he hears the choppers off in the distance. Evidently, they did a couple flights around trying to find him, but they couldn't find him. So he's there. He's trying to evade. He's trying to be as secretive as he can, quiet. And again, the canopy and the jungle is so thick there, you literally can't see a foot. So he gets hidden the best he can, and he's bleeding so bad that he's in and out of consciousness. Okay. Well, when the team got back, they actually fired up another bright light mission and went out after him. It wasn't until the next day, because by the time they got back and got it in, well, they got back out. They're flying over. Dad could hear the choppers coming, and he's trying to shoot off pin flares, but a pin flare is not going to penetrate that canopy. And again, he's in and out of consciousness really bad. He said he was probably awake for 5 minutes at a time when he'd pass out again, because just the loss of blood. He put his own tourniquet on, but if you know anything about a tourniquet, you have to get it so tight that it's hard to do by yourself, especially on an arm, because you have to get it twisted off and then tied off. Well, it's kind of hard to do with one hand. So he was trying to hold the tourniquet as tight as he could, just so he wouldn't bleed out. And he was passed out again. Well, he woke up again, doesn't know when, but he woke up with an AK-47 between his eyes. He was found by VC. So that started my father's journey north. Let's just say he was a POW. My father was a POW. He was captured on July 21st, 1967. For the next couple years, they were actually moving him up north through Laos, multiple different camps. His typical camp was, and I wrote all this down, my father actually wrote memoirs, but his memory was so, let's just say, distorted. By the time he wrote it, he even told me, he said, son, I forgot so much stuff. He said, I just, for one thing, he tried to put a lot of it out of his memory. So here. They actually, this comes, so there was an incident report. Oh, by the way, when this all happened, my mother got a phone call from the military that Sergeant Carol Floor is MIA. That's it. They couldn't tell us anything. Obviously, it was, my mother had no idea what my father was doing. We didn't know he was in SOG. They couldn't tell him anything. All they said was, Sergeant Floor is MIA. He's missing in action. And yeah, that's all we knew, quite honestly, until the day he got home. All we knew he was missing in action. In fact, another year or so, he would have been declared KIA because he ended up being a prisoner for 5 years, 8 months, 11 days. So at the time he was being traversed up north, he was actually he escaped a few times when he could, but he was so weak that they got to him fairly quick. You got to understand, this is very personal to me. I've never really talked about this to many people. So yeah, it's kind of weird for me talking about it. So bear with me. He ended up, again, he was, they didn't, oddly enough, for some reason. So the Vietnamese later in time, they actually developed SOG hunter-killer teams. So they would develop these teams to go out and hunt SOG members because SOG was just, they had prices on their head. If you kill a SOG man, I mean, that was you were a hero in North Vietnam. And yeah, there were definitely prices on their head. They didn't find out. So actually, he ended up at a couple years later. He ended up at the Plantation, which is one of the POW camps in North Vietnam. He was being held there. Now, most of his captivity, he was held in cells 2 foot by 3 foot by 6 foot, just enough to lay down. He was kept. They let him go out to the bathroom, and other than that, he was locked in either a bamboo cage, a cell, or something. If they didn't have a cell for him, they'd tie him to a tree and blindfold him. And they tortured him along the way. Yeah, a lot of torture. In fact, one of the times that he escaped, he was actually captured by VC women. And he said, I was praying to God they would take me back, because he said the last thing you want to do is be captured by them, because they were brutal. They beat the living hell out of him. In fact, Dad, to the day he died, had scars all over his head from gun butts where they just beat the living crap out of him. So he finally got to, he was at Plantation. That was an actual POW camp. He was turned over to the NVA, so he was actually being held by the NVA at the time. Of course, because he was captured in Laos, the Geneva Convention, well, they didn't believe in the Geneva Convention anyway. They actually told him we didn't sign it. They did. Yeah, it was just that was a piece of paper to them. They didn't care about it. He didn't understand why they never killed him, because he could have been killed as a spy. He never understood that. It turns out once they got there, he actually had an interpreter, and there was an officer, an NVA officer, that pretty much traveled with him the rest of his time in Vietnam, they swore he had all this major information, and he kept telling them, I know nothing. I know my mission, that's it. In fact, right before that, he was called into or drug into an office where there was a table, he said about 6 foot wide, and there were 4 NVA officers sitting there, and there was a little stool right in the middle of the room. And they plopped his ass down there. And they looked at him and said, hi, Special Forces man. And we said at that point, his ass cheeks puckered to the chair, because they kind of figured out that he was 5th Special Forces. I don't think they actually knew at the time that he was SOG. Because, again, in 1967, SOG really wasn't that. That was kind of the beginning of SOG when we were crossing the border. They didn't know much. The more they found out about SOG, the more they wanted to take SOG out. Because, again, SOG created a lot of shit for these guys. I mean, killed a lot of people. Well, if you think about it, like I said, 158-to-1 kill ratio. That's pretty good odds in our benefit. And that doesn't include all the air raids and everything else they called in. They would actually go out and scout areas. Typically, they were given a grid of typically a mile by half a mile, and they call them B-52 rates. Because, again, this is where all the troops are being deployed. That's how they were getting troops down to South Vietnam, the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They couldn't cross the DMZ line because, well, we had troops there. So they were just bringing them all the way down. And if you understand Vietnam, so Vietnam is this long little area on the coast, and there's Laos and Cambodia. So you got Saigon down here in the south. And they had little fingers coming off the Ho Chi Minh Trail where they would insert into South Vietnam. And again, they were all the way down to the Mekong Delta. The Mekong Delta was actually a stronghold for the VC. If you see all those movies with the gunboats, that was actually farther. That was all the way south in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta. Fix it. So they found out he was Special Forces. Never did find out that he knows of that he was SOG. He was eventually he was at the Hanoi Hilton for about the last 6 months of his captivity. And often I asked Dad and said, with all the stuff that you've been through, he said, when were you the scaredest, and how the hell did you survive through all this? Now, remember, Dad didn't talk much. He would talk for maybe 5 minutes, and he actually didn't even start talking about it until I got older. For one, he couldn't. Again, he was very, very serious about that NDI because, well, if they found out you were talking about it. In fact, if you talked to any of the SOG guys, nobody discussed anything about SOG until it was actually made public information, which was, I think, in 1993. Yeah, that was 20 years. So he was actually at the Hilton when he was released. And I'm not going into a whole lot of the details about his captivity because there's a lot of it in there. My father was a very private person, and there's a lot of stuff that he might not want out there. Everybody always said that there should be a book written about it one day. He was only one of 58 or 53 POWs that were listed MIA the whole time they were there. And he was only one of 2 SOG members that were actually captured and came out. The rest of them, never, if they were captured. Basically, it was a death sentence. So he was only one of 2 that came out. So he was released in March 5th of 1973. Now, all that stuff in the middle, I'm actually waiting for a bunch of information. I've been talking to a gentleman named Dick Thompson. He's actually very well known and very well thought of in the Special Forces community. He was actually a 1-0 in SOG. I think he served, I want to say 20 missions. Nice guy, and he's actually come across a lot of, because you got to remember, all this information about Dad is gone. It's all been destroyed. There's nothing. In fact, I found the action reports when Dad was captured and so on and so forth. They said he was captured in the A Shau Valley in Vietnam, which he wasn't. Even the medals that he was awarded are wrong. They said that he was an advisor on a South Vietnamese team when he was captured. He was an advisor on the South Vietnamese team. He was actually a SOG member. But again, it was so. The last thing that the people of the United States wanted to know is we were carrying out these operations over there. If you know anything about that time in our period, the late 60s, Vietnam, that's when the protests started, especially after 68, because 68 was basically a turning point in the Vietnam War. That was the deadliest year we had. And also, obviously, at the beginning of 68 was the Tet Offensive. And yeah, in 1968, we pretty much got our asses handed to us. I think there were, I want to say 28,000 deaths, KIAs in 1968. Or there was, at that point, there were 28,000. And if you know anything about Vietnam, the total time we were there were 58,000 plus KIAs. So he was released, came home, stayed in the military for a while. He actually became an MP. He was tops. He was first sergeant of the MPs. Oh, I want to go back to this Dick Thompson a little bit. So Dick actually, he's actually emailed. He's been trying to send me this email. Every time he tries to send it to me, because he said they've dug up a lot of information on my father. He said a lot of stuff that he said it will surprise you. And in fact, he told me when he sent me the message, he said, your dad was a badass and he is a true American hero. But every time he tries to send it to me, it gets kicked back because there's, let me read what it said in there. I'm going to pop this down a little bit, and I got to pull the email up that he sent me. Hang on, bear with me. Now, from Dick Thompson, here's the response I'm getting. Not sure what's going on. Says, sorry, we were unable to deliver your message to the following address, which is me. The message was blocked because its content presents a potential security issue. Now, he said, Dwayne, he said, I don't know if this is because of there still is, a lot of this stuff is still classified. He said, I don't know. He said, but he's never had any issues sending emails out to anybody before. I got to get my page back up here so I can see what's going on. So I don't know what the hell's going on with that, but as soon as I get it, I think there's going to be a lot more information that I will find. And speaking of Dick Thompson has actually written a couple books. Let me pull out, and I've actually just ordered a couple of them. This guy is amazing. Dick Thompson is just amazing. Some of his stories. Little small guy. He was about 5'8" at the time. Of course, you didn't want to be 5'11", 6 foot in Vietnam because you stick out like a sore thumb. If you were across the border, they'd know because there was nobody that tall in Vietnam. Trying to find my notes on that here. Wait a minute. Bear with me. Guess I'm not very prepared. All right, so yeah, Dick wrote. He's actually written numerous books. Very intelligent man, just a great guy. It's called Codename Dynamite: A SOG 1-0's Personal Journey, and it's a 2-book series. If you get a chance, if you want to know more about this stuff, I mean, he goes into detail what he dealt with, his time as a 1-0. Yeah, basically from the time he got to Vietnam and actually joined SOG. Yeah, his book goes into every mission that he went through and what they ran into and some of the stuff that they got into. And there's a lot of information in there. These guys were badasses. So SOG was basically a multi-branch. It drew from Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon. There were CIA members involved, even some Air Force. It was not just an Army unit or a Navy or Marine Corps. It drew from all. Basically, so after SOG was disbanded in 1972, and if you ever heard of Delta Force was actually formed by former SOG members. That's who formed Delta Force. But yeah, these guys were just. If you ever talk to anybody that says anything about SOG, if you ever meet somebody that had any affiliation with SOG, these guys were just badasses. They were the best of the best. There's no other way around it. Their training was far superior, and they were constantly adapting their skills to what was presented to them. Basically, Vietnam was jungle warfare, and we weren't trained in that. When we went to Vietnam, we weren't prepared, especially in Laos and Cambodia, because on the western side of Laos and Cambodia, it was all jungle area. It was just again, triple canopies. This stuff, it was like midnight during the peak hours of the day. It was just so dark in there. And again, you could be standing in elephant grass 10 foot tall. In fact, one of the issues they had, there weren't that many LZ zones where they can get you out. So a lot of times they were actually being evac'd out by cables, by penetrators. They didn't always have it. It wasn't always, drop a chopper down and hop on, let's go home. No, a lot of times they had to be pulled out by strings. On many occasions, they were actually tied off to the bottom of a chopper and flown all the way back into Vietnam, hanging 100 feet underneath the chopper. These guys were just tough SOBs. And again, they were all wounded at least once, many of them multiple times, but they kept going back. These guys, they were awesome. I can't say enough about them. So that goes back to Dad. So Dad started getting, Dad was actually awarded the Bronze Star before he joined SOG when he was in the 199th. After that, I'm just going to go through a list of the medals that Dad was awarded. I won't read off the descriptions. So, Dad got a Bronze Star with a V device and 2 clusters. So, the clusters are basically, he was awarded 3 Bronze Stars. They just don't keep on giving you the same medal. You just have little bronze or oak leaf clusters on it. Purple Heart with 2 clusters. She was wounded multiple times. The POW medal, obviously. The Army Good Conduct Medal. Nation's Defense Medal, Republic of Vietnam Medal, the Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Cross with palm. After SOG was actually finally admitted to, they were awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. That was in 2001, and the Meritorious Unit Citation. Obviously, it was a combat infantry badge and a paratrooper wings. But what I didn't go into there, Dad was also awarded the Silver Star. He was awarded the Silver Star when he got back. Again, I hate to say it, all the awards, all the paperwork involved are wrong. They didn't have the right dates down and so on and so forth. And again, SOG was very, very black. I'm probably not even the best one to talk about it. There's people out there that just, I mean, they can tell you everything you want to. And again, now that this stuff is out and open, there's actually some great podcasts out there about SOG. There's SOGcast. If you look up Dick Thompson on YouTube, there's just a ton of stuff, and the guy's amazing to listen to. There's a number of different guys on there. Tilt's got his own podcast. There's a dedicated SOG podcast. It's amazing. And you know, if you're really into history, especially military history, I definitely recommend going in and listening to some of these things because it's amazing. I mean, truthfully, it blew my mind, some of the stuff that was on there that I didn't know about. And I still don't know a lot. I'm actually trying to gain as much information as I can about Dad and what happened there because, again, the information that we have so far, most of it is either downright lies. I hate to say it. Well, I don't want to say lies. It was falsified reports because, again, I actually got an after-action report a couple years ago. When I actually received it, it was still blacked out. Probably a third of it was blacked out. You know, there were just certain things that I guess they still don't want us to know. For instance, you know, I know Dick Thompson talks about this on one of his podcasts. He actually, while they were out and they were doing a recon mission, they actually took pictures because you could get right to the edge of the Ho Chi Minh. The canopy was so thick. They were there taking pictures of troops moving up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And he took a bunch of pictures of female NVA driving trucks. And he took them back and said, look, I've got these pictures of female NVAs driving these trucks. And they're like, no, you didn't. No, you don't. He said, yeah, I do. I took pictures. No, you don't. He said, I can grab one of them if you want. Yeah, I can pull on a POW. And they told him under no circumstances. Because again, with the unrest going back here, the last thing the American people wanted to know was we were dropping bombs on the Ho Chi Minh Trail when they were females driving trucks. Because you know, it was late 60s. It was the hippie time. You know, it was love, peace, and you know, all that crap. Which is another reason I want to do this, because right now is kind of a unique time in our history with everything going on out in California that we all know about. I probably don't have to say how I feel about that. I think most people that know me or have listened to this would understand how I feel about that. Sorry. Yeah, my father was a staunch, he hated communism. I despise communism. And you got people out there now saying that we want socialism. Well, they don't understand that socialism is a form of communism. You know, again, California is it's a different world. And I don't want to get political on here, so I won't even discuss that any farther. Let's just say that, again, I'm going to bite my tongue. I don't want to go into that. So Dad did get back. He actually stayed in the military until 1977. He decided at that time, he was actually an MP in D.C., and he decided at that time that the military was changing too much and it was time for him to make a change. He actually retired from the military. He actually went into the banking industry, of all things. Yeah, my father became, well, it actually was kind of weird. He wasn't the actual typical banker. He went into a recovery department. He was good at finding people. Let's face it. He was a sneaky little bastard. And I was afraid of my father. I was scared to death of my father till the day he died. I mean, he could barely walk across the floor, but just a certain way that he would look at me. And my father and I didn't spend a whole lot of time together. Once after he got back, my parents divorced a few years later. He moved back down to Alabama, and I was with Mom because, you know, I didn't even know my father until 1977 or 1973. In fact, first time I ever really met my father was at Valley Forge Hospital in Pennsylvania when I was 7 years old. When he came back for his medical, had to spend quite a few months in Valley Forge. So he retired, went into the banking industry. Again, retired to Arizona. As a few of you know, I actually lived in Arizona before I came here. And one of the reasons I was there, the main reason I was there, was to be closer to Dad, so I can kind of keep an eye on him towards the end there. We actually spent some time together at the end. The last couple of years he was alive, his health was obviously deteriorating quite bad, so he actually ended up moving in with me, and he stayed with me for a while and my ex-wife until he threatened to kill her and throw her off the balcony, which might not be a bad thing. She wasn't a sweet person. But not, again, I don't want to go there. Personal stuff. But Dad, he actually passed away September 15th of 2013. That's right before I came to Florida. My sister passed away last year. I am the last remaining Flora, I guess. You know, my nephew's still alive, but he's a LaFrat. That's my sister's son. Obviously, again, anybody knows me, I've never had kids, so I'm the last in line. And I kind of, as I'm getting older, I'm trying to find out more and more of this stuff. Again, been doing a lot of research about this, trying to find as much information as I can. Typically, I hit a bunch of roadblocks. I get to a certain point and all the information just dries up. And it's because a lot of these records were destroyed, unfortunately. Again, we were doing something we weren't supposed to be doing. And it was pretty much covered up for quite a long time. So again, I've run into a few guys, talked to a few people, remaining members of SOG, and there's not many of them left. I mean, let's face it, that generation is, and they're all in their 70s and 80s and some 90s, and they're not going to be around much longer. So if you ever do run across a Vietnam vet, talk to them, talk to the guys. Just let them tell their story. Because unfortunately, Vietnam is not taught anymore. It's not taught in history. Basically, it's a forgotten war. And why is it a forgotten war? Well, I guess because we lost. Why did we lose? Politics. Trust me. We could have invaded North Vietnam at any given time, and actually, we could have taken over Vietnam with no issue whatsoever. But politics was in charge. We never actually declared war on Vietnam. It was always a police action. Like I said, one of Dad's medals says, he was serving as an advisor to a South Vietnamese force. He wasn't an advisor. He was on a SOG team. So yeah, I mean, we got our asses handed to us. A little quick story. Not many people know about. Before we actually went to Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh actually wrote a letter to President Johnson asking he wanted Vietnam to become a republic of the United States, and Johnson ignored him. Don't think about it. I don't think much about him anyway. But we could have averted this whole situation. All you had to do was talk to Ho Chi Minh Trail. We could have averted it. Then again, who knows? Because Ho Chi Minh, why did I say Ho Chi Minh Trail? Ho Chi Minh was a staunch communist. I mean, he was an advocate for communism. And to all these kids out here that think communism is a great thing, research communism. Talk to some people that lived under communism. Communism is not it's socialism, and socialism is a form of communism. I don't care what anybody says around here. What you see on the news is bullshit. Socialism is a form of communism. In a communist state, you lose all of your rights. You have no rights. The government runs everything. They determine what you do, where you live. Hell, they almost determine who you marry. Communism is, again, I'm not going to go into that. I don't want to make this completely political. In fact, I've had a bunch of people that have contacted me. There was actually a writer in Italy that wanted to write a story on Dad. And he actually wanted to write a book. And talking to him, I talked to him for a few weeks. And then he broached a subject that I wouldn't go into. He said, what did your dad think about POWs being left in Vietnam? And I knew at that point where he was going with this. And I wouldn't have anything more to do with it. I said, were there POWs left in Vietnam? Absolutely. I'll guarantee you there were. Are they any good now? No, they're so far brainwashed. They'd never be any good. But I told him, I said, if you want to talk about Dad and what he went through there, fine, we'll talk more. If you want to get into the politics of POWs being left behind, then I'm not going there. And I just kind of shut it down. Dad actually did write his memoirs. I really haven't shared that with many people. Actually, there is actually, I don't have to. I got a picture of it right here. There's a gentleman that actually wrote a book. He wrote a series of books on SOG. It's Mac v. SOG. It's the team history of a clandestine army. Jason Hardy, I've talked to him. He's actually a friend of mine on Facebook. Just a really sharp guy. He wasn't a member of SOG, but he's done his research. So this is book actually number 12. And this is where, because each book he was talking about different teams, different RT teams, different, just different aspects of SOG. And here, I'm trying to find another picture. Nope, I didn't download it. I thought I did. But anyway, in this one, he's got a whole section. It's all about RT Dakota. And there's about I want to say a 10-page spread just on Dad. The rest of it's just the members of it. But Dad, there's actually after action reports, even though they're wrong. Yeah, I hate to say it. The after action reports are just dead wrong. They got all the dates wrong. They got just everything about it is wrong. And this is coming from Dad himself. When we talked about it, again, he did write down some memoirs. So this was a picture of Dad. This is all I knew for until he got back. That's really the only picture of him. We had that on our TV. My mother, bless her heart, she's a saint. She never gave up on Dad once. She kept saying, I know he's still alive. She wouldn't give up on him, and he did come back. So she was faithful to the end. They did divorce a few years later, but they actually became really good friends later in life. I told her, I said, yeah, trust me, you could not have stayed married to Dad because he became a completely different person. In fact, I used to run into people that knew him before he went in the military and said, your father was just always smiling, always such a great guy. I said, never met that guy. Dad was, I don't want to say he was bitter, but he was very much a recluse. He did feel to a certain point that his country had abandoned him, but he found out later, because he wouldn't talk to anybody about this stuff. He did find out later that there were actually, they did send another team in trying to get him out. But he just thought he was abandoned. Yeah, he thought his country abandoned him. But talking to him later, he would have volunteered to do it again. And it wasn't his country that he was mad at. It was the other teams that didn't come in and get his ass out of there. This Dad when he actually got back. That's the old man, quite a bit thinner. I think when he was released, he weighed about 125 pounds when he was released. When he went in, 5'10", 175. Typically their average meal was a ball of rice, a bit of salt. Occasionally they get something special like a slab of fat or something they could eat. Again, this is a picture of the book, and again, this guy, it's a whole series. He only did on each one. He only made, I think it was 250 prints. Obviously, I've got one of them. He was nice enough to autograph for me. So there's not that many available. This is actually Dad when he was, I believe that was in Germany, because as you go back, one of his first stops was in Germany, and at that time. SOG had been disbanded by this time. It was disbanded in 1972, so he was reassigned temporarily to the 1st Special Forces. That's where that patch comes from. And then when he got back, obviously he became an MP. And one more, last but not least, that's Dad. Dad is, he's got a place of honor where most guys do have a place of honor. I won't go into that. He is actually at Arlington. He was buried in Arlington, full honors. He was cremated, so he's one of the few actually sites with just ashes in it. Typically, they have a section where they put the cremated remains, but they actually felt that he deserved full burial and full honors. So I'm kind of proud of that. And if you look there, they couldn't really put any more on his headstone. But yeah, Dad was a POW for 5 years, 8 months, 11 days. He's one of the few. He was actually very lucky, as he told me. He said, there were a lot of guys that didn't come back, and he said somehow or another, God willing, he came back. So that's kind of my get rid of this thing. It's kind of my story on my father. People always, in fact, some of the bands say, "Okay, we're going to interview you. We want to find out more about you." My life isn't that interesting, and I'm not going to talk about it anyway. But I will talk about, this is my heritage. I am who I am because of my father. My mother always said, how can you be so much like your father when you spent so little time around him? Well, as I get older, and I think that's another reason that I'm really getting more involved in this, I look back on my father when he was my age, and I'm thinking, yeah, Dwayne, you are just like your father. You're becoming more like him every day. They say the nut doesn't fall from the tree. I've said that quite a few times. I am becoming more my father every day. His friends always said I have the Flora swagger, whatever that was. Dad kind of had the same attitude that I do. I hate to say it, kind of the IDGAF attitude, which, yeah, I guess that's true. We both volunteer for a lot of shit that we probably shouldn't. Gets us in trouble. Yeah. I volunteer for a lot of shit, and sometimes, yeah, it gets me in trouble too. But anyway, I am who I am because of that man. And I want to honor him because these guys are being forgotten about. And I don't want them forgotten about. I don't want my father forgotten about or any other guys. The 58,000 that never made it back, the guys that did make it back, and they were never the same again, which was many of them. Vietnam was a tough time in our country for many reasons. So I'm not going to bore you all too much more with my story, but So whenever you guys are when I'm interviewing you, say, okay, we're going to turn around and interview you. Well, you just got about the best you're going to get out of me. I'm not going to talk about my personal life too much more. Again, just want to honor it's First Sergeant Carol Edward Flora, U.S. Army retired, POW from 1967 to 1973. That was my old man. Pretty damn proud of him. He is my hero. Miss him every day. Wish he was here to talk to. I've got many more questions that I'll never get answers. That note, I think I'm going to cut you guys loose. I'm going to go hit the sack. Believe it or not, this was actually a little bit harder on me than I thought it would be. I don't talk about the old man that much, at least not to this detail. But I kind of just wanted to extend on. Then when I find out more from Dick, hopefully I have some more information that I can maybe enlighten people on. It won't take this long, but I'm really interested to find out what he's found as well. Again, on that note, so again, this weekend at the Bottle House, Friday night, we have the phenomenal Blackwater Jack. Again, if you guys haven't seen them, you like country, the guys are amazing. I'm going to say that's one of the tightest bands around. They're just amazing musicians. Sammy Davis, yeah, Sammy Davis. He's a vocalist, amazing vocalist, just great guys. They're fun. You'll have a great time. And then Saturday, Center is back, and Mr. Todd makes his return to the Bottle House stage. He's been with them other places, but this is his official return to Center. We're going to call it that when he gets back to the Bottle House. Again, Todd, great guy. Interviewed him a few months ago. It was a great interview. I think the world of him. He's just good people. All the guys in the band are great. They're hard workers, and we're going to have a blast Saturday night with them. Oh, and I wanted to dispel a few rumors. There have been some rumors floating around about the Bottle House. I wanted to dispel them now. I've heard that we are cutting bands. No, we're not. The truth is, starting in July, we are going to take one Saturday a month, the second Saturday of the month, and we are not going to have a band. There's a reason we're doing that. I'm not going to go into it right now, but are we cutting bands out? No, absolutely not. Only one Saturday a month. We're not going to have a band on a Saturday, and there is a reason we're doing it. It'll become more apparent later. So that, no, we are not cutting. We are not cutting the bands. And I'll tell you what, any rumors you hear about the Bottle House, shoot me a message and ask me. I think y'all know I'm going to be as honest with you as I can. I'll tell you whether it's true or not. And oh, by the way, we do have a live band karaoke every Thursday. That's back. We just took a short little respite there. There are a few things we had to get worked out. But actually starting this week, live band karaoke is back every Tuesday night at the Bottle House. So you can come in and sing your ass off in front of a band. I'm not a big karaoke guy, so you probably won't see me there very often. This month, the last Thursday of the month, we got Zebron and James. The next month, we're going to bring Gary Shutt back. But this weekend, yeah, we got two phenomenal bands. Again, I can't say enough. Blackwater Jack is amazing. Center is amazing. It's going to be a phenomenal weekend at the Bottle House. I want to throw a shout out to the staff there because, in my humble opinion, we have the best damn staff in the area. They work their ass off. There's nothing they won't do. They're just great people to work with. Love them all to death. Again, I can't say enough about them. You all know who you are. And all you people out there, if you come in there, you know who they are. And all I ask from you is treat them with respect, treat them great, tip them, take care of them, smile, pat them on the back, and say good job. So that being said, folks, I will see you guys Friday night at the Bottle House. I'll be the guy up there with that Frankenstein rig. I might even get up on stage for a few seconds. Who knows? I hate doing that stuff. I hate microphones. Anyway, you guys have a good night. We'll catch you next time. Adios.